What's up, party people? My name is Sunny Ray. This is the Sunny Ray Show, episode 3 for the day. I've got another really interesting guest. His name is Craig. Craig practiced traditional law for almost 25 years before realizing the way legal advice reaches ordinary people is broken at the front door. So, not the advice itself, but essentially the access to it. With that said, Craig Rashkis, am I saying your last name correctly?
You are, and
Okay,
thank you very
awesome.
much.
Yeah, Craig, nice to have you on the show. Yeah, super interested to, my favorite question is just to go straight into the deep end and ask, what is it that you're building at Legal HD? Why should the average person care? Maybe in your own words, if you can help us understand, that would be a nice kickoff point.
Yeah, well, again, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate the opportunity to chat a little bit about the service and just the interest in general. And Legal HD Advice and Counsel, or Legal HD for short, is a standalone legal advice and counsel service. And the unique thing about it is that a it's a legal service that provides an individual, a small business owner, a group of people, spouses, the opportunity to connect with an experienced lawyer, ask questions, talk through maybe a legal situation that they are dealing with, and get some initial clarity or get oriented in terms of what are we actually dealing with, what are my options, and then the advice and the counseling part comes in, because once we're able to identify, what somebody's dealing with, what their options are, then we can talk with them about, what maybe their preferred direction is. Each, client is unique, each circumstance is unique. And as I think, everybody can appreciate, there are different moments in everybody's life. And on the day that you have a legal question or you're dealing with a legal issue, might be different if you were dealing with that same question or issue, a month, a year ago, or at some point in the future. So even the circumstances change, over time. And we try to help people realize, what do they truly want to get? How do they want to address a legal issue? Perhaps what are they capable of financially, even otherwise, emotionally, things like that. And then our ultimate goal really is to deliver clarity and confidence so somebody can make an informed decision about whether and how they're going to go about dealing with the legal issue that's before them.
Really interesting. So Craig, 25 years practicing law. What did you believe about the profession at the start that you no longer believe now?
Well, I think that in terms of legal HD, it's for me, I still very much believe in the practice of law, and even the what I have come to say regularly now, the traditional practice of law, which would be how everybody thinks about lawyers and what lawyers do. And I think that after, all those years of practice, I had come to a crossroads in my career, which, is not uncommon, right? I think it's very common for most people to come to a crossroads where they take a moment or maybe several moments and think about, where their career is at, what are they doing, what are things going to look like moving forward. And I had that moment. And, it was out of that moment that and really thinking about my own career. So it was a little bit, selfish uh, initially, thinking about my own career, where I was at, where I wanted to go, that I started thinking about legal advice and the delivery of legal advice, and the fact that personally I thoroughly have always enjoyed the real-time interaction with clients and talking about their questions and their legal issues. And when I started to formulate Legal HD as a standalone advice and counsel service, it was then that I began to realize that this wasn't just something that I wanted to do, a shift in my career, but actually it was something that nobody was doing. And when I started to realize that, and I, was doing just some initial like test sessions when it was totally informal, not even branded, anything like that, just beginning to realize that this was something that was much bigger than just, or could be much bigger than a career pivot for myself, and that the need was vast, and it just wasn't being addressed.
Yes, that seems to be the starting point, right? For I guess all great companies, in terms of just identifying a problem, and it's nice when you can see the problem itself. So I was going to ask you, what's the moment kind of in a normal person's life when they need a lawyer for, let's say, 20 minutes and have absolutely nowhere to go?
Well, the moments, the different types of moments are varied and many. I think for the average person, um, those moments may only come up a handful of times in their life, but I think there are, several examples that many people can appreciate. If they haven't lived it themselves, they probably know somebody who has. And things that come up in my mind are issues that revolve around estate planning. A classic example. I'm in my mid 50s. I have parents that are getting older, and it's not uncommon to hear from a peer that, say, their mom has had a health event and she's landed in the hospital, and then there's a realization that, there's no will, there's no trust, or the will that was created, 20 years ago, mom doesn't know where it is. And all of a sudden, all kinds of questions come up. Um, Other examples are, a business owner gets a contract from a vendor, and they begin to look it over and they realize that they just don't understand what all that language means. And um, a classic one that I think everybody can relate to is getting served with legal paperwork, right? If somebody sues you and you get served with a lawsuit, that's a very typically that's a very stressful moment. And again, the average ordinary person has almost certainly never dealt with that. And there's always a concern about, well, what am I dealing with? How do I deal with this? What are my options? So, these are very common, I think, examples of when the ordinary person can have a legal need, have a question come up, but because of the fact that they may not really even know what they're dealing with, or may not um, be able to see what their options are, there's some very basic foundational questions that can give rise to legitimate concern, stress, fear of the unknown. What's going to happen to me? Is my life going to end? And being able to access a lawyer, even if only for a brief period of time, right? You say 20 minutes, and, our motto is, it could be anywhere from 10 minutes to 2 hours, right? And there is no hard time frame to the service. It's totally client driven in that sense. It's, the nature of the question or the questions, and what people are looking to get out of it. And sometimes they can get what they need in a brief period of time, 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes discussions go on for an extended period of time. And either way, we're finding, the premise, the hypothesis always was, and we've now seen the data that shows that the client satisfaction, the client relief, and appreciation for the service is real and it's genuine.
Hey, Craig, is it kind of like, and I hate to put words in your mouth here, but it's not like a Harvey for the average guy, is it?
No, I wouldn't say that it is at all. In fact, the interesting thing, considering the time that we're living in with, the ever growing presence of AI and its use
Hmm, hmm.
in all different industries, including the legal industry, and Harvey being, an artificial intelligence platform for lawyers, and making their work, more efficient and things like that. The Legal HD is not a AI based service, and that's one of the things that I really appreciate about the service, not just from a delivery of the service aspect, but I think Personally, I appreciate the fact that we're a genuine legal service that is provided by, um, real human lawyers licensed to practice in their state, and we have utilized technology. In fact, I would go as far as to say that the use and the leveraging of technology is what has made Legal HD possible, in the sense that it is a service that is brief in nature. And, again, right, we've already referenced 20 minutes, 15 minutes. And, historically, anybody who would have tried to assess this type of model in the past, and people have, the reason why I believe that it has never really taken shape or gain any level of permanence is because the economics of it weren't possible until technology made it possible. But just to get back to your question, it really isn't a Harvey for the common person. It is an actual, human driven service, and we just happen to leverage technology to create, I would say, the environment and create the structure that makes delivery of this service feasible from the
And
lawyer
and
side.
and Craig, you're also explicit that Legal HD is not a lead generation funnel for a traditional practice, right? So what does that distinction matter? Oh, like, well, I guess why does that distinction matter so much to you?
Well, and that's a very you've really caught on to, like, that's like a personal, um I wouldn't say pressure point, but it's just kind of a flag uh in the sand, so to speak, that I've put down, and it really comes from a place of, um right now, when people have the desire to talk to a lawyer, which is really what Legal HD, that's, when you want to talk to a lawyer, that's, you can connect with the service and do that. Right now, the traditional practice of law, people will schedule a free or no obligation consultation with a lawyer with the belief that they are going to actually speak with a lawyer. Number one, actually speak with a lawyer. Sometimes they don't. And even when they do, that they're going to be able to ask their questioner questions and get substantive advice and direction. And that's not really the purpose in the general or in the traditional practice of law. These consultations are business development tools. And that's really where my position comes from, is that this is not traditional practice. This is a new approach to delivering legal advice. It's a new service category, and I will say it's like an alternative to the traditional, and I want it to be true to that. So I don't want it to. It's not a funnel for traditional practice, in disguise. It is literally a standalone service where people can come and get legal advice and, get some initial orientation. Now, I do want to clarify that I have a traditional practice, and the Legal HD specifically is not designed to be a funnel for my traditional practice. The interesting thing about the service is it is first and foremost legal advice and counsel. However, as you or anybody in your audience can imagine, um, there are any number of legal scenarios and situations that do genuinely call for a traditional engagement. And once we have, clarified for the client, this is what you're dealing with, these are your options, help them kind of walk through what might be best for them. When they get to a place of saying, or realizing, like, this seems like a pretty big situation. I probably should engage a lawyer. And, you know, I say, if I'm giving the session, I might agree. Yes, I think you should. Well, then the question always comes up is, well, what to do next? And we do refer people out to other lawyers who, specifically handle the questions or the matters that have come up in the session. So in that sense, again, the service is not designed to be a funnel for somebody else's practice. But when that referral moment comes, we don't hesitate to refer out And the way that I think about it and now talk about it with other lawyers who have their traditional practices is the benefit that Legal HD can provide is that we can provide, qualified clients, meaning people who they do want to retain a lawyer. They've already got some initial understanding about their situation. We may even talk through prospective costs of what a traditional engagement may look like, timeframes, which really delivers a a client that is already walking the path. They have their consciousness has been raised. They're not going in cold. And I think for anybody in business, period, you like those kinds of customers. You like those kinds of clients. So in a way, just to segue a little bit from your question, I've had a lot of people over the last, few years approach me and express a lot of excitement and intrigue about Legal HD, and then say like, wow, what a disruption to the legal industry. And the service is not meant to be disruptive. It's walking into an unmet category of need and filling that need. And then really we are very complementary, I think, to traditional practice, again, for the reasons I just described. When somebody needs to engage a lawyer in the traditional manner, we're able to really help them understand what that's going to look like and then hand them off to somebody, and they're really ready to go, as opposed to what often I think happens for clients is they're not really clear on exactly what the lawyer is going to do and what's going to happen. And it just leads to more confusion and ultimately frustration. And dare I say, it feeds into that stereotype of, that a lot of people have about lawyers um, just not being good people, or, always finding a way to not just, to get the best of the client as opposed to delivering the best for the client. So I'd like to think that Legal HD is helping to change that by enhancing what traditional lawyers are doing in their traditional practices.
That's I like that perspective. Hey, Craig, what can you walk me through a session from like booking to meeting with the lawyer and after? Like what actually happens?
Yeah. So what happens is when it comes to booking, it's all client engaged, meaning they go right to the website, they click on the button to book their session, which is book my session, and we have a few simple steps, which actually we worked on for a tremendous amount of time to get it down to just a very manageable number of steps to onboard somebody. And you go through just basic collection of name and email address, where you're located, um, and we have a calendar. They select a date and time that works for them. We do have a fee agreement that I think is modest in the sense that it is not a 10 plus page standard legal fee agreement. It's reflects the nature of the service. And once they go through all that, we do capture payment information, but we don't actually take any money up front. We just do a credit card authorization. And once all that's done, then they have their date and time, which typically can be anywhere from the next day to anywhere about 2 weeks out. That's about where we're at now. And again, usually that's by client decision. If they want to talk to a lawyer very next day, typically we can find them a time slot that works. And then at the date and time of their session, we offer telephone sessions, video sessions, and even in person. Some people still want to meet with a lawyer in person, and when that is possible, we do that. But outside of the in person, where somebody would come to the office, what happens is you basically click a link, not unlike what we've done to do our meeting today. And whether it's audio only or video, you go into the meeting session, and then the lawyer is either there waiting or joins shortly after. and then you have your session, talk through the things. If you've provided any documents ahead of time, the lawyers had an opportunity to take a brief look at that, and then after, we don't typically do any tremendous follow up, but there might be some follow up that the lawyer decides to do. Say there's some key points that were discussed that the lawyer knows would be helpful for the client for recall purposes. We do a closing email after the session, and the lawyer can put in whatever information they would like to put in after that might be helpful for the client moving forward. Again, if there's going to be a referral, that information is typically put in the closing email as well. And after the session, usually, within a couple hours, if not quickly after the session, you get your closing email that summarizes what was talked about, the time spent, the ultimate cost of the session, and then that's it. And the engagement is closed out. And anybody's welcome to come back and schedule another session, which does happen from time to time. There might be follow-up questions, or the situation might change and they want to come back and talk to that lawyer again to get a little bit more advice and counseling. And that's typically what happens.
Really interesting. Hey, just to kind of go back a little bit, right, with what we were talking about earlier. So you kind of like draw this hard line, right? A legal service company that delivers through technology, not a technology company selling legal services. Like, why does that matter to the person on the other end?
Well, it matters to the person on the other end because when just to use one of our catchphrases, when you just want to talk to a lawyer, I mean, you want to know that you are actually talking to a lawyer. And the only way to do that is to have a service that allows people to actually engage directly with a licensed attorney so that they can have the trust, and there's the credibility there, knowing that the answers that you're going to get to your question or the advice that is given is legitimate and is real. And I think what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a lot of companies, and it's not just say this calendar year, but I would say over the last 5 to 7 years, there's been, in my opinion, an increase in frequency of this, where you see a lot of companies that are popping up and they want to deliver legal services, and they are utilizing lawyers to do that, but they don't think of themselves, and oftentimes they're stating outright, a lot of times in the fine print, but they're actually taking a clear stand that they are a technology company. And I think that again, in my opinion, especially as a lawyer, I think that really makes a huge difference, because at the end of the day, when that proverbial push comes to shove, the technology company is focused on the technology. Whereas the lawyer, duty bound and hopefully otherwise, is focused on the client and the delivery of the advice and the client's best interest. And that is something that is beyond the tools that a lawyer uses to deliver that advice. It's like an innate thing. And if you're a company that says outright, even if you're delivering legal services and you're doing it legitimately through the use of lawyers, if you say that you're just a technology company, in my opinion, as humble as that is, I think what you're saying is you're saying that what comes first is the technology, and we're here to exploit the technology for the company's gain, as opposed to trying to deliver the very best legal service that we can. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your hardest problem, Craig, it's not delivery, right? It's that nobody knows this kind of service even exists. Like how do you teach a whole public kind of a new category?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'll tell you, it's a realization that I did not see. I legitimately did not see coming, and I think that a lot of that has to do with, even though I like to think of myself as a business minded individual that happens to be a lawyer, I mean, in developing the service, I really, right, the rubber was hitting the road in terms of, I have to be the entrepreneur, I'm being the business person. And the deeper that I got into defining the service and realizing, what it really was and what it could be, I realized that it was a category creation scenario. And, discoverability is an intriguing and in a lot of ways, can be a somewhat daunting issue to face. And how, the question of how do you educate, the general public on a new category, you know, I, I could just say to you, right, in a very stereotypical way, like, all the things that anybody would think of, right? Advertisements and social media and, content and all that. And yes, I mean, that's true. We're working all of those angles, but I think the truth of the matter is that at the end of the day, it's actually this is a prime example of what I'm doing right now is having a conversation about the service and talking about it because while I will be the first to say that I do not know as much as many, I think, about a category creation business and how to successfully do that. But I've, begun to do some research and looking into that. And I think that while all the stereotypical things are important, the content, the social media, the advertising, right? Getting the message and the brand out there. Category creation is big, and it isn't something that turns on a dime, and I think a lot of it pivots on the general public's view. It's like their context, right? And the context shift. And to put it in perspective for legal HD and legal services, I think that the way that traditional practice has developed over, many, many decades, let's just loosely say the last 100 years, is it's actually created a situation where the average ordinary person, um, they they're convinced that maybe the question that they have isn't important enough to warrant the actual involvement of a lawyer. And when we sort of break down how would that be true? Well, if the engagement of a lawyer under the traditional practice model is going to require committing to a long-term representation, and of course, long-term has a varying definition, but something other than just talking to a lawyer, it's costly. Many lawyers outside of, say, the um, uh, personal injury type contingency fee arrangement, which is a segment that most people are familiar with, but it's only one small segment of legal practice, and the rest of us typically take large retainers, thousands of dollars. I mean, just loosely, it could be anywhere from 1,000 to 15, 20,000 dollars just to bring on a lawyer to do something. And so that's how you realize that, well, the average ordinary person that might have a question that is keeping them up at night, but why would they think that it's not worth, asking a lawyer? Well, there you go. That's your reason. And um and so because of that, um, you know, we've come up with this approach that is allowing people to realize that they can engage a lawyer and they can ask these questions, but it's something that, in my opinion, you can't just spend your way to. You can't spend your way to that realization. You can, and I think it's important to do things and take steps that are going to shorten the runway, but a collective consciousness of the general public is going to shift on its own time frame. And in my opinion, the best way to help that along is understanding that the need is there and trying to be at the places in the moment when someone is thinking to themselves, I really would like to talk to a lawyer. And again, these days, going back to technology, what's happening when people realize that if they can't talk to a lawyer, the access isn't there. They don't have thousands of dollars. They wouldn't even want to spend thousands of dollars because they just want to ask a question, have a simple conversation. They can't find that anywhere. They are, say pre ChatGPT, pre LLMs. They would, talk to the brother-in-law who was a lawyer, the friend who was a lawyer. But what if you don't have access to any of those people? Nobody in your family or in your close circles is a lawyer. Over the last 20 years, people would go online and do online searches. They're going to Google trying to find answers. And now, interestingly enough, with the rise of large language model platforms, people are actually going and they are engaging in, a type of conversation. And the AI is talking to them and is providing information, and in certain respects is providing answers. But what I would say to that, and I don't say it out of angst to artificial intelligence, but I think that there's always going to be scenarios where people just aren't sure. Obviously, now the prominent LLM platforms are all very clear, especially when it comes to legal questions. That they're not, lawyers. They're not giving legal advice. They do make mistakes, and the shortcoming there, I think, is if you don't know what you're dealing with, if you don't know how to interact with the AI, you don't know what questions to ask, in a lot of ways, you are rolling the dice. And I only say that as, a little bit of a cautionary, prompt for people. It's not that the AI can't be helpful, but if you don't know what you don't know, it's hard to get to a clearly defined answer. And every once in a while, you get an answer that sends you in the wrong direction. And that's where a service like Legal HD, comes in, because a lawyer can apply their judgment and their understanding based on prior experience to, give the right answer and direct the client in the right way. But again, it's it's not one client at a time, but at the same time, there is an element of that, right? It's kind of an amalgam of all of it. It's not just something, we're not selling widgets. We're trying to help people understand that something that almost in a latent way they've always wanted or always needed, but have never been able to get access to, and now they can.
Well,
So
what do people say when they finally understand what you're doing? Like, is there a reaction you get again and again?
there really is, and I would pose it in sort of two phases, because to date, what we still do a tremendous amount of is the education part, right? People will find the service, but they might not understand something about it, or every once in a while they like doubt it, right? They're skeptical, like, "This seems too good to be true. I really did just wanna talk to a lawyer, and I found your service, and it looks like that's exactly what I can do. I don't believe it." And they'll contact us through email, or we have a phone number, they'll call. And so or people might come to us through the traditional practice, and we'll offer the Legal HD, so we educate them a little bit on the service, and once they realize what it's about, there's this, a lot of times, and when I say a lot of times, I mean, it's like 9 out of 10 times. People will say, "Oh," like intrigue and excitement, like, "I didn't know that I could do that." And when we say, "Well, now, yes, you can," and they'll take us up on it, they'll sign up for a session, and then once they do the session, it's remarkable, Sonny. It's not every time, but it is the vast majority of times. What I will hear, and now I've gotten a couple other lawyers doing some sessions, what they will tell me is inevitably at some point nearing the end of the session, which actually is a key, it's a key tell to the lawyer that the end of the session is near, because the client inevitably will say something along the lines of, "I'm so happy I found this service," or, "I can't believe, what the value that you've just given me. This has, really been stressing me out, or I've been very frustrated trying to find somebody just to talk to, and here you are, and I got everything that I was looking for and then some." And so to hear that over and over and over again, to me, it's not only obviously it feels good, but it's again confirmation, especially under the context of realizing that it's a new category of service and all the work that needs to be done around that. To hear that over and over is very validating that, you know, everything that we have believed from the earliest days is true and accurate and that we're on the right path.
Oh, awesome. Hey, Craig, help me land this plane. By the way, there's quite a few people listening. Thank you all for tuning in. I guess 5 years out, right? So if standalone advice and counsel is kind of like a normal thing people know they can buy, what does that change about how ordinary people live?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and it gives me an opportunity, if I haven't been waxing philosophically already, to just say that 5 years out, if standalone legal advice and counsel is a thing, if Legal HD has been successful in its mission, meaning that it's not only successful in its own right, but inevitably there's, at least one or two others out there doing the same thing. That how that changes the everyday person's life is, I think that it, in a very practical way, it makes legal advice far more accessible. It takes down some of the ivory tower and obliqueness that traditional law practice currently, kind of veils itself in, sometimes purposefully, sometimes not. But I think really at the heart of the matter, it, in a very real way, allows people to not have to go through that stress and that anxiety of not knowing, and it makes dealing with legal issues and addressing legal questions much more everyday. And even though you might still only encounter it a handful of times in your life, it doesn't have to become a life event all on its own. Much like I think we're seeing in the healthcare field, the implementation of telehealth, which now I think has largely become video based, has really made healthcare, even though I'm sure there's many that would disagree, but healthcare in a lot of ways has become a lot more accessible. And when you have a concern about your health, you don't have to be up at night wondering what it all means and how you're going to get any insight and get any help. You just go ahead and schedule a video session with your primary care provider. And standalone legal advice and counsel can operate in a very similar manner. So that is how I think it's going to impact the everyday person's life. It's just going to bring a calmness around legal questions and concerns that doesn't currently exist.
Beautiful. Craig, where do people learn more about Legal HD? Where do they learn about you? And are you on LinkedIn, I guess? And yeah, and we can stop after that.
Yeah, people want to learn more about the Legal HD advice and counsel service, they can go directly to the website, which is legalhd.net. And if you want to learn more about me, if you think I'm that exciting, then I definitely am on LinkedIn. And I will say I've had an intriguing and interesting career path, which undoubtedly has impacted, brought me to where I am right now with Legal HD. But you can see all that there. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn if you want. You can reach out to us in general through the website as well. If you have questions about the service, we're more than happy to talk to anybody.
Awesome, Craig. Thanks, man. Really appreciate it. Wow, we have wasn't expecting 31 people to tune in middle of the day here, but appreciate every single one of you. And no, I think Craig, I definitely had an underappreciated view of lawyers until, well, two things. One, when I was a kid, I remember my dad had a tenant who tripped in our basement and decided to sue my dad. Not fun. And then most recently as an adult, we had, I think I might have told you the story, but in India, we had the central bank come after us, and we took them to court over it, and on the basis of violation of human rights and etc. We ended up winning. So that really, changed my perspective of how powerful the legal system really is. And when you align with the right advice and the right lawyers, life can be pretty amazing. So, Craig, thank you so much for coming on the show. Once again, thank you all for tuning in. And yeah, stay tuned. I have a couple more interviews today as well. We'll be back. And Craig, hang out for 1 minute. I'll bring the stream to an end. Cheers.
Yeah. Thank you, Sunny. Yeah.